Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and I'm excited to finally kick off a series that several of you have been asking for. Today, we'll dip our toe into the water of psychic abilities. To be more specific, we'll look at some less conventional ways that can be used to perceive and interpret information beyond the 5 physical senses. Now, if this isn't your thing or you feel strongly about it, no worries. Skip the next couple of episodes, but be sure to come back because, as you know, our topics change all the time. That said, the reason I decided to do this series is because I personally have an interest. We call it the spidey sense in my house. So I personally had an interest in learning more, but I also know and have heard from several folks in the community, the Facebook community, and that listen, that have shared that they have an interest in learning more as well. So, knowing that there are several of you that already dabble in this space or that also have an interest, my hope is that we'll all listen and learn and have open minds over the next several weeks as I talk to people about how they came into their psychic abilities and what they do with it today, and any tips on strengthening our own intuition. So on that note, let's kick it off. Joining me for this first episode is Rauncie Reynolds. Rauncie is the Pagan Chaplain at Rochester Institute of Technology. She's a wedding officiant, a funeral officiant, a spiritual advisor, a tarot reader, a Pagan Priestess, a teacher, a birth and death doula, and an event producer who is known also as Granny Goth. Rauncie is about as real deal as they come, and I'm super excited to have her be with us today and have us kick off this series. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. And for those listening, we've been trying to connect for a bit and life just got in the way. So we're super excited to kick this off today. Before we dig into the what some of this is all about, can you share a little bit about the how and why as it relates to you getting into this area of work and focusing really your life's passion now in this space?
So I think for me, it's something that started when I was very young. I was always interested in the metaphysical. I remember going with my father to the library when he was taking some college classes as an adult. I was about 11 years old. And, this was way back. So Dad would leave me in the library by myself. You would never do that now. And I would be looking at books about witchcraft, about tarot reading, about anything in that genre I was interested in. So I would just be there with a big pile of books reading, and I loved to read. So it was a very early start for me, though there were a lot of struggles because my mother was very religious. So this was something that I had to keep hidden from her. So it started very young, and I got some tarot cards. And actually, I started out with regular cards and learned how to read, not tarot, but regular cards in the way that you would read tarot cards, and learned how to do candle magic. And there is a picture of me, and it's around here somewhere in a frame, when I'm 11 years old doing candle magic. My father was a photographer, and he would take photos and develop them himself. And I still have that picture. So that's where it started.
Always from the beginning. Can you remember anything that caused you to start picking up those books, or were you just naturally drawn to it?
I think probably part of it was that my father always let us watch scary movies. Mom did not like the fact that we were allowed to stay up late on Friday night. I think it was Friday night, to watch The Cool Ghoul, who was this guy in Cincinnati, Ohio, because I grew up in Ohio, who would introduce scary movies. And I always thought the witches and all that were super cool. And so
that's the fascination. That's probably what kicked it off.
Yeah, that was the fascination.
Well, and
Yeah.
you said you love to read, right? And I'm a reader too. And I think there's something about reading, and, many of us use it as an escape early in life that takes you to anywhere you want to go. And you can be anywhere you want to be and any person you want to be. You can kind of see yourself in all those books and characters. So I think that's sort of tapping into that creative side and into curiosity and being open-minded, trying to learn new things and learn about other places.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I love the magical stories. And,
Mm,
like some of my favorite movies were magical movies like The Wizard of Oz.
yeah.
Always loved The Wizard of Oz. And I liked The Wicked Witch.
Shocker there, now that I've met you a few times.
Yeah, I wanted that giant crystal ball.
All right, let's just remind the audience. You didn't want to do mean things, but you wanted that crystal ball and you wanted
wanted
those
that crystal
powers. I'm
ball.
using quotes, air quotes. You wanted those powers, right?
Yeah,
Oh, so fascinating. That is fascinating. So it really has been with you since your very early childhood memories. So that's really interesting to me. Wow. Well, I want to jump in. Well, there's so many areas that I want to touch on, but I want to jump into one that kept coming up with the group, and multiple people in the group have such a strong interest in tarot readings, card readings. And it's one of the things you're most well known for and do, and all these events that you do. And so I'd love to just talk a little bit about what intuitive card reading is. Let's start there and then I'll build on that.
Okay, so for me, tarot reading is a way to have a tool, the tarot cards, for me to make a connection with the person that I'm reading for, and then make a connection with the divine. So for me, it's not anything scary. I don't think of tarot reading as telling the future. I see tarot more as a way to give spiritual advice. And the intuitive part comes in where, as I am reading for someone, I do intuitively pick up on things about the person, things to say to them, how I take these cards and connect them, and a story begins to present itself to me. And I also read the cards intuitively. So what does that mean? There are traditional meanings for these cards. And when I first started reading tarot, of course, I studied that. It's important to know what the traditional meanings are, what the different suits are, what each card means. But as it's like anything else, you learn it, but then it's time to practice. And as I did that, I would have different interpretations depending on what card it is next to, the person I'm reading for, also the artist for the deck, because different artists give different interpretations. So if I'm reading from the very standard deck, which is the Rider-Waite-Smith, that may be a lot different than if I'm reading from the Everyday Witches Tarot, which may have some different symbolism on it. But generally, they have very similar, unless you're working with a deck that's just like way out there. So being able to trust yourself and not be afraid to use cards, because what if I get it wrong? What if I forget what the card means? And I teach my students to just trust themselves.
Yeah.
To trust, what they're seeing when they pull a card.
Yeah.
I do a little circle once a month where that's what we do. We practice on each other. And I tell them there is no wrong answer.
So that's a great segue into one of the questions that keeps coming up is, so what if you feel like you sort of have this, I don't know, level up on intuitiveness, or you feel like you can sort of read things that some people can't, and you want to build on that? Is practicing with a deck of cards a great place to start? And if you're doing that alone, like I was going to say, how do you know you're going in the right direction? But I guess you're probably going to say there is no wrong direction, but go ahead.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to practice. And what I give as an assignment to my students is I want you to pull a card every day. I don't want you to look at the book when you do. And I want you to write what you see. What is it that you see? Like I just pulled this card. This is the Queen of Cups. This is from the Supernova Tarot. So it's a little bit different than the tradition. So if somebody pulled this, they're going to look at what is the symbolism on this card? What does that mean to me? And that is a way to start to build this intuitive style of reading because you begin to trust yourself, and what I will say is hold that card, write about it, go about your day, because set a little bit of an intention. I want to see what this card means for me today.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, journal about it. Did something happen in my life that I can read
Could
this
tie back.
card? Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And would you suggest people, you said, don't worry about if you know the deck or you've studied the deck. So truly, if you wanted to start this today, you could start this exercise. You buy a deck of cards and you just flip a card or pull one that is speaking to you, whatever works for you, and then do what you just said. Start writing whatever comes to mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you are new, what I would say is, after you have written what your intuitive piece is, you can get the little book out and look at it and see, here's some other things this card could mean.
Interesting.
Don't look at it as it's a test.
Yeah.
I'm going to see, did I get it right?
Right.
Because, being an intuitive reader, we bring our own experiences into this. Tarot has been around for a very long time, and we live in a modern world. And so how we see some of these symbols is different.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. And of course, we bring some of our experiences as well. Talk to me a little bit about, so you said, I don't read the future. Mm-hmm. And yet I think so many people think when they're walking in to get a reading, oh, she's going to tell me when I'm going to meet my soulmate, or she's going to tell me what job I'm going to get, or she's going to, whatever the question is, right? Whatever the burning question is. Mm-hmm. And that's not what you do. Mm-mm. Elaborate on that a little bit so people can understand then when they go get a reading, right, what should they be expecting?
So what I want to say about that is I cannot say absolutely that I might not know those things, because I might. And if I do, I will share them, because sometimes the cards lay out in a way that I'm like, oh, wow, what I'm seeing here is, that you're going to have this major change in your life within the next couple of years. And I only share that if I feel very, very strongly about it. Like maybe I see that their relationship is in danger. Now we'll talk about that, because I will ask them, can you talk about your relationship? I'm seeing in the cards that there is a lot of strife and chaos. Let's talk about that. And then we can pull some more cards to see what the cards have to say, what advice the universe would like to give you about this. What do you need to do? Do you need to leave? Do you need to stay? And we talk about things like that. But as far as the traditional, the stereotype is the woman who is like, come into my parlor and you're going to meet a tall, dark, handsome stranger. Yes. And, or they give some horrible, something bad is going to happen to you. That is what I call sideshow reading. A lot of times that's more of an act.
Yeah, it's all about the sensationalism, I would guess.
Yeah, the sensationalism of it, because some people pay for that. That's what they want. They want that. So it's important to see, like, what kind of reader are you getting? Are you getting someone who, you're on a boardwalk and they've got like a sideshow reader who's there to tell you your future? Or do you want someone who is there to give you spiritual advice and may be able to answer some of those questions? Because I heard somebody the other day say, if you go into a tarot reader and they ask you about your life, they're not a real tarot reader. That is not true.
So glad you brought that up. I'm so glad. Because when you said about the relationships, you will ask them to tell you a little bit about the relationships. Mm-hmm. And I hear that. We hear that. I see that. People think they shouldn't tell anything.
Mm-hmm. No, that is absolutely not true. You're going to get a really good reading if you are open. The more closed off people are, the harder it is for the reader to intuitively read you and to get the messages for you. What we're establishing in the very beginning, when I sit down with someone and I say to them, talk to me about why you came here. What is it that you are looking for? And if they don't give me a lot, I can still do a reading for them. And a lot of times it comes out anyway. That's what I have found. But what I do stress with people is the reading is about you. If you go into a reader and you say, I want to know this about my boyfriend, which happens to me a lot.
Yeah.
What I'll say is, let's lay the cards and see what the cards have to say about your life right now.
Yeah.
And then at the end of that, if you have more questions, I can lay a couple of cards to see how he relates to your life. Because first of all, I don't think it's ethical for me to, read about somebody who's not there.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I do think most do, though. Most people will answer those types of questions.
Yes, and I will answer them. But what I really want to focus on is the person that I'm reading for.
Yeah.
And
well, that makes sense because you're reading off of their vibe or their, whatever, their energy, I guess is the word I'm looking for, right? I mean, that's how it works.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is, like I said, these things will come out. And I have been doing a reading for someone, and I knew the minute I laid the cards down that her husband was cheating on her. Now, here's the thing. As a tarot reader, you have to think about what you share, because I'm not going to just go lay the cards and say, oh, honey, your husband is cheating on you. That's not the way you should approach this. Instead, I choose the path of, let's talk about how you're feeling about this.
Yeah.
Because almost, I would say 98% of the time,
they know.
That's
why they're there asking that question.
Yeah.
They know.
And this is confirmation for them. And when they begin to say, I feel like my husband is cheating on me, I can say, okay, I want you to look at this card. And, I feel like the universe is confirming what you're feeling. And let's talk about that, what you can do.
Wow.
That's where you take out that kind of really dramatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think your ethics are at a super high level, which I think is fabulous. But unfortunately, I don't think that's the case for everyone. I guess other than your comment about making sure what kind you're finding if you go for a reading, I mean, what do you advise people other than the sort of flashy things that make it look like a carnival show or a circus show? What are some of the things that you could look for to know this is really a person who's ethical and they're being intuitive? They're not like prescribing something. Like, is there anything that we can look for as consumers?
Absolutely. If they are asking you to buy extra things like, oh, I see this in your reading, and if you spend $100 on candles with me, I would say be careful of things like that. I tell my students that's not ethical. But there are different people who have different practices.
Yeah.
But you can easily get caught up in something. It happened to me as a young person. That's the only reason I feel like I can talk about this. I went to a reader when I was in my early 20s about a relationship I was in, and she told me I was cursed. That's another sign.
I've heard this from somebody else before.
She told me I was cursed, but she would do the work to break the curse for me if I would buy $100 worth of candles.
Awful.
I did not do it because I had already read enough about practicing myself, and I said, why would I do that? I can do it myself. And in fact, I know that it's more powerful if I do it myself. And I don't believe that there is a curse on me. And I reject that, because what we believe in our minds, we make real. Our thoughts, our words are powerful.
Yes.
And if I go around saying I am cursed, I am cursing myself.
Yes.
So I think being careful about that kind of thing is so important. And just, do you connect with this person? You're not going to connect with every reader. Do you feel comfortable with them? Most of the people that come to see me come back to see me over and over again. I do discourage them for coming too often, because I feel like it's important to give yourself time to, work through the reading that you already had. Because I have people who would come and see me every month. And, if it was just about money for me, I'd be like, yeah, come on in. But I suggest every 6 months. If there's a lot of really crazy stuff going on, maybe every 3 months.
Talk to me a little bit about doing it virtually, because, I brought this up when we first connected, that even I was struggling to, and I believe very much in readings, and I was struggling to understand, how could it really work virtually? I mean, I'm on a computer, you're on a computer, we're not together. How can you really read my energy? And your answer to that is?
You can definitely do it.
I mean, I knew that answer, spoiler
uh,
alert, because we already had this conversation, but share with people how, like, how can you do it?
So I have firsthand experience with it. And I will tell you that there was a time when I would have said, I can't do online readings. I definitely still will not do phone readings because it's important for me. And see, I think every reader is different. For me, it's important for me to see your face. I need to connect with you that way. I need to look at somebody's eyes. It's just a really important piece of it. And it wasn't until COVID, which changed so many things.
Yeah, some good, some bad.
And the very first thing that happened that made me realize, you know what, I think I can do readings online was I'm also a practitioner and belong to a tradition. And we were having rituals online during COVID. And it was amazing. I never thought that could work. It was touching. We were connecting with each other. So I decided to start doing, Zoom readings, and it's something that I do. I prefer in person, but, it does not take away from the experience for me at all to do that.
I love that message. And I love for people to hear that because it certainly opens up doors to who people can interact with, right?
Another thing I would like to warn people about is like, if you are going to get an online reading, try to find a reader who, actually has like a parlor or has a lot of experience. You don't want to go to one of these websites that has like 50 readers that, are probably paid $10 an hour.
1-800 read me kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think back to your point about, I'm paraphrasing, but trust your judgment, right? If you don't connect with somebody in a way that feels right, or if it feels a little icky or a little salesy, and I'll just be honest, people know that listen regularly, I always connect with people before I do an interview just to make sure there's a connection. And I definitely connected with a couple of people for this series, and I didn't move forward because it just didn't feel quite right. Couldn't tell you exactly, right, but it just didn't feel quite right. And I think people can sort of know that they know. You have an intuition about people, so just trust that because it's probably something not quite right if you feel that it's a little off. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Trust your intuition.
Trust your intuition. That's what this is all about, right?
Yep.
Talk to me about tea leaf reading because I don't know what it is.
So tea leaf reading is something that I do in addition to tarot. So if I do a tea leaf reading, it would be at the end of the tarot reading. So if I was doing a reading for you, I would give you a cup of tea that would have loose tea leaves in it. And we would drink our tea while I'm doing the reading. And then at the end of the reading, I would say, give me your cup.
Really?
So then I would, there's a process of what's called throwing the cup, where I turn it upside down and turn it 3 times and then turn it over. And I'll look into the cup and look for images. Again, this is about symbolism. And then I will tell you what I'm seeing in the cup. And because of the type of tea leaf reading I do, I'm doing at the end, it's more like a confirmation reading. There's so many ways you can read a cup. I do a very basic one where I just look for some symbols and talk to you about that. But it can be very complicated with the way that you lay out that cup. Like, here's the past, the present, the future. And these are the things that matter the most. These are the things that don't matter as much. These are the most intense things. There's all these different zones of the cup.
Yeah, that's wild.
And the type of tea that you should use. And, a lot of tea leaf readers have different ones that they like to use. But tea leaf reading has been around for a very long time. And not many people do it anymore.
Yeah.
I just taught a little beginner's class here in Rochester, and it was wonderful. I brought all my teacups in and all my teapots, and
that's wild.
Just taught people the basics. So
it's kind of making me think that you could use anything. And I'm not saying that to minimize the use of these tools, but I'm kind of thinking it's the intuitive things that you're coming up with, the symbolism, the whatever you're feeling out of the energy. And whether it you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, but whether it's tea leaves or the clouds in the sky or the tarot cards, you're really telling the story of what you're feeling and getting from the energy of talking with this person and what's going on with them. Is that true?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
So interesting.
and many times it's such a spiritually intimate experience for me. A lot of times the people that come to see me cry during the reading because they're able to release things and talk about things that they couldn't talk to anybody else. One of the things I think that's really important to know is, like, for example, I am a high priestess. I'm also a chaplain, and I take reading very seriously. And whatever someone shares with me, and I tell them this in the very beginning, is confidential. I will not talk to anyone about what you told me. This is between us. I've had people come to me and then somebody else they know or they're in a relationship come to me, and I can tell they're trying to get a little bit of info about me, but I tell them right from the beginning, I cannot talk about this other person. So if you ask me questions, because they'll start off with, well, I want to know. And I'll say, I can't do that. It's kind of like if you're a lawyer, It's
Yeah. It goes back to your level of ethics again.
Yeah.
I'm glad you hit on the fact that you're a high priestess and that you're a pagan chaplain, because I wanted to get into that. So part of me thinks that, well, at least for the chaplain, let's start there. Do you feel like that legitimizes being a reader at all? Do you feel like people might look at you differently because you do that also?
I'm sure that some people do look at me a little differently. It's interesting because I actually I got some pushback from the pagan community in the beginning about, what do you mean you're a chaplain? Pagans don't do that. From my own community, and I'm like, wait, why would you think that? Pagans need somebody to visit them in the hospital too. Pagans need someone to be there when there's a death in your family. But I do think for some people that does kind of, they feel like Rauncie is the real thing because she does all these other things. But I want to add to that I am a pagan chaplain at RAT, but I'm also an interfaith chaplain at the hospital. So that means that I serve people no matter what religion they are. And when I'm in that role, I don't walk into the hospital room and say, hi, my name's Rauncie, I'm a pagan. I don't do that. I just say, hi, my name is Rauncie, I'm a chaplain. I'm here to help you. What can I do for you?
Love that.
So I have a prayer book with me that has readings and prayers from all different religions. And that way I can meet them where they are when I was doing my chaplain training, someone asked me, how can you do this if you're a pagan? And I said, because you know what? It's about them and not about me. And so I'm there to provide comfort for them. And if reading Psalm 23 or saying the Lord's Prayer helps them, that's what I do.
So you go in there and you're a chaplain, non-denominational, and I would suspect that most of the time, these people do not even know your other jobs, your other roles.
Like the woman who had put down that she was a pagan, because you get asked what religion you are. And I always check the list when I go in, are there any pagans in the hospital? Because I'll go visit them for certain. And so I went to visit her. I was all excited. I was like, oh, I am Rauncie. I'm a chaplain. And I saw that you were pagan. And I am also pagan. And she crossed her arms and said, I'm not really a pagan. I was just pissed off. And I was just like so taken aback by that. I was like, okay, well, what religion are you? And she said, I'm a Catholic. And I said, okay, well, we can
work with that.
We can do that. Yeah, we can work with that. I work with with Catholics all the time. And we developed this really wonderful relationship. I had another young woman who was she had listed no religion. And sometimes I go check on those people because a lot of times they may be pagan. And when I walked in, she said, another chaplain. And I said, well, could you give me like 2 minutes? And she said, all right. And I said, well, I wanted to share with you that I'm a little bit different than the other chaplains here. And I'm a pagan chaplain. And she just smiled and she said, "Oh my gosh, really? I did not think there was such a thing." And she was a pagan. But in most cases, I do not share what my religion is because it doesn't matter in that situation. There are people who specifically request to see, for example, a Catholic priest
Yeah.
or only a Christian chaplain, and we, follow that. So, yeah, it's been a wonderful experience for me.
For me, I think that if you were out at a cocktail party or whatever, and you were having coffee and you were talking to people about all the roles that you have, I do kind of feel like, probably not fair, but I do kind of feel like you being a chaplain at the hospital makes people look at you in a more legitimate way than if it was a reader in the mall. I don't know. I'm just pulling that out, but I have to think that probably happens.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel really proud about the fact that I feel like I am blazing the trail for other people to follow me.
Yeah.
Because there are not a lot of pagan chaplains. And being able to say, this is something you can do. But I would say not every pagan could do it, but not every Catholic could do it, or not every Christian could do it.
Right.
You have to be willing to put aside your own personal beliefs, no matter how strong they are, to serve people where they are and not try to convert them or change their minds.
Such an important point, because that's what it comes down to. It comes down to somebody that's very compassionate, that can connect very well, very easily with most people, and that can be open into finding a way that will help soothe them or just be with them or whatever it is, right, that they need in that moment.
Right.
A super, super important point, because it's really, I hate to say it's not about the religion, but it's really not about the religion at that point.
It's not.
In most cases, I'm sure, in some, but in most. Talk to us a tiny bit about being a pagan priestess, because I'm betting that most people listening maybe haven't dealt with that. What does that mean? What does that look like?
So I have been a high priestess in my tradition for over 25 years now. I'm also a initiated elder and crone in my tradition. Sometimes I think people are just hung up on the word pagan. What does that actually mean? Pagan is like the big word, just like Christian is the big word. And then you have all the different denominations under it. So you can be a Christian who's a Baptist or a Methodist. Pagan is like that. Pagan means that big word. Most pagans, honor the earth, believe in having, ethical beliefs that, not to harm anyone else, and worship many gods rather than just monotheistic. Most pagans are polytheistic, but there's even two different kinds of polytheistic pagans, those that believe in one great power that we can relate to through different archetypes, and those who actually believe that there are different individual gods and goddesses. So I trained with a tradition for 4 years and then had my own coven. And I have been providing for my community, doing, hospital work and ritual work and teaching for all these years. So it's a big, big part of my life.
What I love about that story, what I love about hearing about you in that role, is you really stand on the edge of all the conventional things we think we know, or that are like, the commonalities of where most people walk in life. And you really walk on the edge. And yet, when I talked to you, when I met you, sitting here with you now, you are like just the average person. I don't mean, again, I use just, but I'm trying to portray that you are so quote unquote normal, whatever the heck that means. But I think it's so fabulous for people because we come into these things with such preconceived ideas of, what that looks like and what those quote unquote kind of people are like. And, ooh, that's scary. And yet, if you just sit down and connect with people, you find out that they're not really much different than you. And I think that is a good message just across the board. And I find it here, the more I talk to you, the more I learn about you. And I hope people will pick up on that as well. That yes, you do some of these and practice some of these alternative or at least not mainstream things. But so what? There's nothing scary about you, and there's nothing scary about any of it. You're just like everyone else. I hope that's not offensive, but that's what came to my mind. I felt like I needed to say.
No, it's not offensive at all. And, it's something that has been a reoccurring theme throughout, the last 40, 50 years for me, because I'm 63 now. This past year, I was invited to speak at a Catholic church, and I just went in there as, who I am and shared. They wanted me to talk about my beliefs and what I do.
Wow.
And afterwards was wonderful because they had a little thing afterwards with food, and there were a couple of visiting priests who came to talk to me. And one of them said, I wasn't so sure about this. When I came,
Right.
he said, but after you spoke, I thought, wow, it's not what I expected. It's not what I
Yes.
Yeah.
You are you really are a trailblazer. You really are paving the way for others that come after. But also, I just think it's such a lesson in just humankind.
Right.
It's just about connection and leaving our beliefs on the table and just connecting with people as people.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a great lesson. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
I was going to kind of wrap up and close and ask you about what your favorite role is when I was thinking about how I was going to structure our conversation. Out of all these things you do, like you have so many roles, and I was going to ask you, where you love spending the most of your time. But then I thought, that's unfair. That's like asking a mom which kid they like the most, right? Because you're passionate about all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to ask you instead, what do you think they all have in common?
I think what they all have in common is, being able to see people and connect with people where they are.
Yeah.
And that's so important to me. And, I've had people, I'm getting all emotional.
That's okay.
I've had people say to me that one of the things they love about what I do, like with my rituals, and I'm also an event producer and I do events for charity, is that I invite everyone in. And a big part of that is that as a young person, I never felt like I fit anywhere. And so what about this that I think is all of these things have in common is that I am able to be that open person who, I guess in some ways, embodies what I would consider the spirit of the goddess, who says, you don't have to be afraid. Be who you are. You can talk to me. You're safe here. All of that. I think that's what all of those roles that I play have in common.
And I do think that is the vibe that you give off to people. So well done, well done, well done. I want to ask you if there is anything else that we didn't hit on as far as for people that are curious, for people that want to tap into something they feel like might be there. Do you have any other advice that we didn't talk about that you want to put out there?
Well, I think, for people that are interested in things like tarot reading or, having their own practice, spiritual practice, how important it is to find real people if you can. You can't always do that, I just always worry about people connecting with online things that may not be, how can I say?
They may not be what they say they are.
Yes. Do your research.
Yeah.
Because there are some good things out there. But if you can find someone to be a mentor, someone, that can help you on your path, to do that. We've gotten away from a lot of that. I come from the day when you learned from a high priestess and then it was all hands on, but that's not always possible. And, you can always find tarot reading classes and things like that online. I even do some sometimes. And most of my things I do for free.
I was going to chime in and add that to the end, that something else about you and the point you made about you not doing it all for the money is that and people can go out to the website. We're certainly going to put your links out there. I found you to be extremely reasonable. And I think that's another indicator, right? If people are going and they're getting a reading and it's costing them, I'm just going to throw out a price at $500. That's high, but let's just throw that out there, right? If people are charging crazy amounts, I just have to think they're probably not in it for the right reasons. There's probably a scale, right? I think there's probably a little bit higher and a little bit lower.
Right.
But if you're seeing somebody that's really above the norm, I don't know that it means they're better. I'm going to sit here and say at this point, from having met you, that doesn't mean that. I think maybe they're not doing it for the right reasons. I don't know. That's where I'm at right now. Do you think there's validity in that?
Yeah. And I mean, I would probably draw the line at trying to make a judgment on someone, but I do get exactly what you're saying. It really depends on where you live, how much people are going to charge, because people are going to charge what the market will bear, as they say. But there are people who are doing this for the money and it's their living. But I have the privilege, I think, to be able to say sometimes I'm not going to charge you anything because I'm retired. I'm retired from higher education. I have had a blessed life, at least the second half of my life. So it's not life or death for me, but I do think it's important to think about that exchange of energy. And if you can't afford an expensive reading, there's going to be someone that will read for you for less, and less in this field does not mean not as good. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's the message, right? I think that's the message. You make a really good point that certainly people are in different positions in their life and in their careers and what they have to do to pay their bills, because this is their work. They should be compensated for it. But I do think, to your earlier point, if you're getting the impression that they're going to nickel and dime you, or they're going to string you along to come see them every month, or there's signs that it's all about the money, and just make sure you're looking at those warning signs.
Right, absolutely.
Well, I just could talk to you forever, but I just know that you have 17 jobs, so I don't.
And I have a big event coming up in 2 weeks, so I'm crazy right now.
Well, I suspect you have lots of events going on, but what's this one?
So I do a fundraiser once a year. It's the Rochester Vampire Ball. I created this 5 years ago in memory of a young woman in our community who was murdered by her boyfriend. And her parents set up a scholarship for a high school student who is a writer. And my goal is that every year I would raise enough money to cover the scholarship for them. So it's a big dress-up event, which I absolutely love. I'm considered the Rochester Vampire Queen.
Love it.
And I've been in theater all my life. So yeah, it's a lot of work though.
Again, showing the commitment to the community. I wish you tons of success. And I would say, from doing some research on all your work, I've seen that you also participate in what I'll call, I don't know if I'm going to name it right, mystic fairs or that kind of thing. There's like psychic fairs. And I think that I saw you do one. You were doing one live at somewhere. And I thought, this is a great way to really get exposed to some of these things, to go into an event like that, to go into a fair like that and not be overwhelmed, but to be able to touch on and meet with a bunch of different people and kind of see what they do and what their service is like. So that was kind of cool for me to see.
Yeah. That's at Mythic Treasures where my parlor is. And, one of the things I love about the woman who owns it, her name is Sue. She's fantastic. She cares about the community. So at these Mythic fairs, she doesn't charge people for a table. She's just like, come on in, bring your stuff to sell. You want to read. She charges nothing because she just wants people to be able to experience and, to support each other. So it's a really different model than a lot of other places.
Yeah. But again, it's an indication that if you look hard enough, you can find these types of places and people that if you want to really learn more or connect with people on any of these topics. Though that's probably what you're looking for. People like that.
Right. Absolutely.
Oh, fabulous. Well, thank you so much for talking to us and for spending some time with us today. I just wish you all the luck in the world, and I don't know what else, but I hope our paths cross again, because I couldn't have been happier to have met you. And a big shout out to Dr. Wendy Gladstone Brown for sending me your way. Such a fabulous find. Thank you again for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.